Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. It's been a while. We had an ice storm, and so things got a little backed up and slow here, but we're back on track. And we have a wonderful book that we're going to be talking about tonight that I'm very excited about. It's so appropriate for the times. It's just amazing and so appropriate for what all of us are going through right now. It's called Alchemical Lightwork, and it's a book about how to manifest light and engage in a path of spiritual regeneration. Drawing on a profound alchemical tradition with rich history, this book reveals the significance of light in spiritual life to transcend materialism and seed new cultures rooted in authentic wisdom. Spiritual alchemy provides a guide to transformation and regeneration of individuals, couples, and even communities. This author shows how working in this ancient tradition can foster spiritual awakening and healing in a dark age of technological materialism. The author is Dr. Arthur Versluis, and he's president of the Hieros.institute, a nonprofit devoted to realizing the sacred in contemporary life. He's the former chair of the Department of Religious Studies at Michigan State University, and he's written numerous books, including Sacred Earth and Secret History of Western Sexual Mysticism. It's also, I just realized, you know how it is, that he comes from an area where I spend a great deal of time. I went to Eastern Michigan University many decades ago. And it's horrifying to say that it actually was many decades ago. So welcome to the show, Arthur. I'm so glad you could be with us tonight.
Well, thank you. I'm pleased to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Well, it was, when I was going over where you worked at Michigan State, I thought, oh my gosh, I graduated from Eastern Michigan in 1966. So I'm familiar with that area, but you're not in that area right now.
No, I'm actually in central Michigan, in a very rural area, but I'm still a professor at Michigan State, and I did my graduate work at the University of Michigan. So I'm a pretty deeply rooted Michigan guy.
Well, then you know Ypsilanti, and that's where I was. So
that's true. I've been there.
Yeah, well,
more than once.
Actually, though, it was so long ago. My son and daughter-in-law visited U of M when they were taking their daughter to check it out, and they went through Ypsilanti, and he said, well, it's a really big school. And I said, well, it wasn't when I was there. It was very small, but times have changed. I don't think I'd even recognize it if I went back there. I want to talk about your book because it's so profound for the times. And anybody who's in the spiritual field is noticing how we are in a dark age, or how we are coming to an end of an age and how there is mass confusion and all sorts of things going on. So your book is so appropriate for the times. I know how long it takes to write a book, so you must have been preparing for this for quite a while. But what pushed you? What was it that inspired you to write this book at this time?
Well, when I write a book, I write it because I feel called to do it. I feel that there's an inner need to bring something out, and that it needs to be brought forth. And so that really was the genesis, not only of this book, but really all of my books. But there's also a backstory, which is that now many decades ago, I was giving a talk at a bookstore in Minneapolis, and I'd been invited there by a somewhat esoteric group to give a talk to them. And then I gave a talk at a bookstore, and at the bookstore, this gentleman came up and introduced himself, and he had under his arm this manuscript, and he said, "I think you should see this." And so we began to talk, and we've been fast friends ever since. And he is a practicing alchemist. He's worked in the alchemical tradition for many, many years, and he's also a clinical psychologist. And so he's done both of those for many years. And so I've been working with him, and we're doing a book together, which is on the depths, on the deeper dimensions of alchemical practice. And then I spoke with him about doing this book, which is a book for a general reader that gives an overview of alchemy, of spiritual alchemy in this specific tradition that he has been working in for so many years. And so that is really the backstory of this particular book.
Well, most people are familiar with that term when it comes to let's turn lead into gold. You know, that's where alchemy and people's understanding of it, many people's understanding of it kind of stop. So go a little deeper in explaining what alchemy is, because I think people don't understand how it can be applied to them and their spiritual journey.
Well, that's true. And there are different kinds of alchemy. The kind of alchemy that is all alchemy is transformative, in the sense that all alchemy is about repair, renewal, returning to a primordial or pristine state. The fundamental idea of alchemy is that we are fundamentally, primordially whole, but we are broken by circumstance, by our past, by the world around us, and how we are in the world. And alchemy is a way of understanding the path back to wholeness and to that original unity. And there's really three kinds of alchemy, practical alchemy. One is working with plants and creating medicines. And medicines are meant to do what? They're meant to heal and restore our wholeness. And then working with minerals, which is a much stronger way of transformative practice. And then also spiritual alchemy, which is, again, a transformative practice. Each of them are different expressions of the same thing.
Well, when you talk about spiritual alchemy, first of all, the spiritual is an aspect that most people, at least that I know these days, are working on a spiritual pathway. But I don't think that a lot of people understand that the spiritual pathway is not an external one, but it's an internal one. And therefore, how do we get to that place where we can open ourselves up to the portals to the pathway that is inside of us, because we are, after all, we are a spirit on a human journey. So we have to transcend, we have to work through the physical reality that we have placed ourselves in order to link to the spiritual reality that we're seeking.
That's true. And alchemy is a way of understanding this path that you're talking about, a transformative path. It provides a map, and the map takes us through darkness to illumination and then to flourishing. And so it gives you stages, and it gives you an overall path in terms of understanding the terrain that's applicable to any religious tradition. Alchemy is found in Christianity, in Christian tradition, which is the form that I've been taught. But alchemy is also found in Hindu tradition. There's Buddhist alchemy, and I refer to that in the book a little bit.
Yeah.
And there's also Islamic alchemy. There are a whole variety of different alchemies. And that's because alchemy can be applied to different spiritual traditions, different religious traditions, but it provides a general map. And so it's very useful, actually.
I know I have been, I did a book on the journey of the Bon monks in India, and how their spiritual beliefs don't exactly go along with the Hinduism, but are different, and yet they're the same, and how they look at spiritual evolution and growth. And I think that especially during these times, because it doesn't take a brilliant person to understand that humanity is going through an amazing shift and change at this moment in time. And so we're all looking for ways to make this journey easier, better, and bring us to a point in time where we have a golden age instead of a darker age.
That's true. And part of the reason that I wrote this book was to point to what can be on the other side of some of the challenges that we're going to be facing and that we are facing now. That on the other side, there is the possibility for us of creating a more grounded, a more whole and integrated way of being in the world that incorporates the three realms, which is not only the human realm, but also the natural and the spiritual, so that all three of those are interconnected. And in order to have a culture, to have a living culture, you need all three of those realms to be interwoven and interconnected. Otherwise, without that, there isn't actually a culture. A culture requires having a spiritual dimension and also integrating that with the natural world. And so that's something that increasingly for the last several hundred years has not existed in the West very much. And now in the modern world as a whole, it doesn't exist very much. But it has to exist because it's the natural way of being in the world. And so alchemy points toward that and that kind of integration and wholeness. And so that's really what the book is pointing towards.
I know when if you go far back in time to when it was just Pangea, there was that's my watch. It's not.
Oh.
I'd love to say that spiritual saying, yes, she's right. Now, why did I say that? I could have said, look, Spirit is telling us, yes, this is exactly what this is. If you go back to the time of Pangea, it was one land. We were one people. There was one culture, and we were at peace with it. We were at peace with the animals. We were at peace with each other. And then as the plates broke up And because of climate, because of all sorts of things, society changed in each of the different plates. Humanity lost a lot of its touch with the spirit and an understanding and working with the spirit. And the times that we're in now, where in many cases the spirit is taking backseat to so much because of materialism, because of well, even AI is doing away with spirit. It's taking away our creativity. So that the times in many ways appear to be shifting us away from the spiritual realm and into a more materialistic realm that has no life to it. How do you pull away from that? How do you back off? And you don't get rid of your cell phones because you have to contact people and stuff like that. But how do you get to a point in time where you can touch in with nature, where you can look at the spiritual aspects of things instead of being so fundamentally cold and spiritless?
Well, I think that's very, very true what you're referring to. Uh, I've given meditation workshops to groups of students, and I talk about this in the book. And in talking with them, I asked them about what, you know, what their feeling was, what they were experiencing in the world, and many of them were anxious, very depressed. And I asked why. And I said, statistically, of course, that's true. This generation in college right now is the most on SSRI, mood elevating drugs, the most challenged in terms of mental health on record. Why is that? And the students told me in the discussion, it's often and largely driven by social media, that social media is very addictive and they falsify their reality because they see their friends falsifying their reality about
Yeah.
how things are. And their anxiety comes to a large extent from that. Uh, but how do you chart a path out of that? And of course, teaching meditation, practicing meditation is very important in that regard.
Yes.
And I talk about that in a book that I published quite recently, actually around the same time as in the Alchemical Lightwork book. And it's called Breaking Through the Materialistic Deception. And that book is about exactly what the title suggests, the act of breaking through our self-deception about material reality being the only reality, which is so deeply embedded in our society that it is just astounding when you really realize it. And so that book is really taking people through the materialistic perceptions that we have inculcated in us that are there everywhere in how we see the world, and taking us through to how we begin to break through those. And so that book is kind of a complement to Alchemical Lightwork. The Alchemical Lightwork book goes much more into practice, into the practices of working with light, invoking light, and how that can work individually and for couples, and then also in terms of small communities. So those three things are all critical to developing future cultures, which is really what this book behind the scenes is pointing toward, beginning to develop a more integrated and holistic way of being in the world.
When the world is going through such change, when there's war, when there's argument, when there's the darkness. And I know one of the phases you talk about is a darkness, of the blackness, a time in which there is no light. And it feels as though in many cases we are in or entering into one of those time frames. I think when we talk about we are coming to the end of an age, so to speak, ages don't just flip over overnight. It's change. It's subtle change, and it takes sometimes hundreds of years for an age to be in that transition point to where the light is coming in more and more and more. And I'm not sure where we are in this particular shifting point in time. There are people who acknowledge that they are light workers. But I sometimes question as to what people think a light worker is. And to me, it's an example, it's becoming a living example of the belief that you have inside of you, as opposed to preaching with all the buzzwords and everything, and yet not living that quality. So I'm seeing people at least acknowledging the fact that there is a light path, and it's not like the light bulb light. It's a spiritual light. It's a light that is brighter and more radiant than the sun. And I'm hopeful that your book will help people understand that seeking that light within themselves is a journey they can achieve, where society as a whole may not quite be there, but the personal one is definitely there.
Well, that's where it starts. That's where it has to start. And that's where the book is really aimed at finding yourself in contemporary society. It's difficult to do many things. Society around us seems to be, in some ways, breaking down, in other ways, stronger. And at the same time, we're caught in a kind of era of this breaking down of barriers, this kind of dissolution that's happening. Where, for example, you mentioned AI. Well,
Yeah,
we're living in a time in which many people in these AI corporations talk openly about replacing 50% of the jobs of the population, or 60%. Now, let's just imagine that. Imagine the disruption and dissolving quality of that. It's essentially, if you look at the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune in Aries that's coming up, Saturn as rigidity and structure, and then the kind of nebulous dissolving quality of Neptune. That's, in a nutshell, that's a mythological way of describing the world in which we find ourselves, where the things we take for granted are dissolving around us. And
yes,
so actually, that is intensifying. So we're moving toward a kind of greater fragmentation and dissolution. And where do you find solid ground? Where do you find stability? And the only answer has to be first within.
yes,
So we have to start within and ground ourselves. And the way we do that is through contemplative or meditation practice, being aware of light and illumination, which is there in all of the different religious traditions, but in some is really highlighted and emphasized. And so you draw and invoke light, you invoke the light within a religious tradition. That is essential. And that is essential to personal transformation, but it also can be expanded beyond oneself. And so that's all important, because the time we're moving into, more and more things are dissolving around us. And
yeah,
so it's the time to point out that these things exist, including in the West itself. These are Western Christian traditions that I'm talking about here.
yeah. I think that's an important thing. In no way, shape, or form am I saying anyone should forego their religion. It's just a deeper way of expressing it and experience it inside yourself. And you don't have to be a churchgoer to have that kind of spiritual feeling, but many people do get it out of being in church, and therefore go for it. I just feel that, especially with AI, well, I think AI is fascinating. It's also frightening in that I'm talking about writing. People have AI writing their papers for college. How do you know that someone has used AI or has done their own work? How are you able to tell? I know how I tell, but how do you tell if you ask for a paper for someone and they hand you something that's totally brilliant? How do you know if it's them or if it's AI?
Well, what I do in my courses is include a lot of discussion. And so people post and I ask them for their views, and sometimes in discussion, of course, you have back and forth. And so it's certainly possible that some people run their posts through AI for editing or something like that. But it's very, very difficult for AI to have the ring of human authenticity that comes from saying, when I was young, this is what we did. This is the organization my father belonged to, and I'm teaching right now a course actually in social enterprise and religion and social entrepreneurship. And so students are reflecting on social enterprises that they have familiarity with.
Mhm.
Well, you go to an AI and you just get this antiseptic, dead response. You can post it if you want, but then one of your friends who's in the class posts, "Well, that doesn't sound like you." So it
Yeah.
actually is. It depends what you ask for. If you're asking for genuine human interaction and response and developing a business plan that's meaningful to you, maybe you'll incorporate some AI kind of generated stuff, maybe. But for the most part, what I find has that ring of human authenticity that comes from back and forth. So that's how I structure my courses, actually.
Well, I have found that AI does not have a sense of humor.
I'm sure.
So, and I for a number of years, I was a rotating minister in a spiritualist church, and I found that, looking at past sermons that other people had given, and some that I had given early on, and thankfully they didn't pay attention and they asked me back. It was, if there's humor, if there's joy, if there's excitement in what is written, most likely it's been inspired as opposed to AI'd. And so that's where I draw the line as far as looking at things people have written. And but AI does such a beautiful job. I mean, it really does. My tech had looked for a bio on me and he asked AI to write it, and he showed it to me and I said, "That's absolutely brilliant. You can't use it." It's not human. It's beautiful and it's accurate, but it's just from other things that I've written. But I think that there is such a danger with AI because it takes away a person's creativity. And for me, the creativity is the fuel that energizes the spiritual pathway.
I think you're absolutely right on that. And, uh, whenever I'm engaged in writing a book, I'm writing it because I know first of all, that no book like that exists. And that when I'm writing it because it needs to exist. And it comes about in some sense, of course, I shape it. In some cases, I've read and worked in a topic for years, sometimes decades, in order in order to be able to do it. And yet, in the writing itself, it comes through you. And sometimes you come back and read your own work, and it comes from somewhere that you're aware of. You wrote it, you shaped it,
Yeah.
and yet it's not really yours exactly. It's a mysterious process, and it's also a kind of alchemical shape. It's forged in an alchemical process that has all these different aspects, and that creativity is central to it. You're absolutely right. That's essential to what it is to be human. And these
Yeah.
parasitic machines cannot do that. They can steal. They are great at stealing, but they are not able to do what we're talking about. It is just not possible.
I found in a lot of my material, I found something I thought was really beautiful, but didn't know who wrote it. So I sent it through one of those, is this original, or, and it came back that it was taken from somewhere else. And so I started to look for where it was taken, and it was taken from me. So
Yeah.
I plagiarized myself. And
I've had the same experience. I was looking at I asked several of these systems about a topic that I'd written on, and so I got a beautiful response back, and then I said put in the documentation, and the documentation was all my work.
yeah,
It's stolen. It's just a glorified form of plagiarism, really. That's actually what it is.
yeah.
So
Well,
human creativity, you're absolutely right. That spark of creativity is the essential thing. And to be in touch with that is really to be alive in a different way. And
yeah.
so I think that's really important for people to be aware of.
Well, and I think also sometimes you'll write something that is um, not of you, but through you. So it's a channeled form of yourself on a higher level, which is really special and exciting and magical. And when you talk about looking for the light, seeking the light, and finding it in nature and in spirit and in humanity itself, I think that your book is so important for people to read, because it gives them almost a map of, okay, how can I do this? How can I expand myself into this? And how can I stay away from those things that want to kill my creativity? And even schools today, I taught school for 25 years, and I look at schools today, and in many cases the kids are taught for a test. They aren't taught to think anymore. They aren't taught to create anymore. They're taught to perform like robots, and it horrifies me.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm actually working on a book on the history of higher education and what's happening to higher education right now. What has happened to it over the past 150 years, roughly. It's an extremely interesting history, and quite sobering. But again, on the other side, and I think a lot of systems now uh, simply need to break down. They need to break and to fall apart in order to be restored, because that's the process of alchemy. Alchemy is the breaking down and the working through the darkness, which is also our own darkness, but coming through that and invoking light allows regeneration, and that's the basis of flourishing in a more grounded way. And that's the process that will have to happen culturally as well. It's not only individual. It's not only in terms of just a couple of people. This same process also works in terms of culture. And so first you have the breakdown, where we are now. This is the breaking down. Then you have the regeneration on the other side. And that's the thing that is very easy to forget when things are breaking down. But that's on the other side. And so that's part of my calling, is to mention these things.
Do you think that AI is just the newest toy that eventually we'll let go of it and find something else that's more fun to play with? Hopefully.
Well, there are different ways to think about this and to understand what's happening around us. Really, there are two broad movements. One is centralization, and AI is about centralization. It's about the centralization of power through technological complexity, which requires huge capital expenses and enormous toll on the natural world. So it is in many ways a kind of you could say caricature almost of the society we have developed. But the opposite movement is decentralization. And so you have these two things happening at the same time. One, the movement towards greater and greater centralization, which cannot last. It is not possible. No totalitarian system, no matter how complex and how much people want to enforce it, can survive indefinitely. It's just not possible because it's not aligned with who we are as human beings. The opposite of that is decentralization. And that is what this book actually is about. And some people call that right, or belong to the right or political right. But it's not right or left. We're not talking about political polarities. We're talking about centralization of power and decentralization. And I am on the side of decentralization of power and the decentralization of human life to allow individual local flourishing. I think that's really vital for the future.
I would agree. And yet there was a short on I forget where it was, but they had some teenagers, and they put them with a rotary telephone, and they said to them, make a phone call. And do you know they couldn't figure out how to make a phone call with the rotary phone? They would push the numbers in and pick up the receiver, and nothing. They would they couldn't figure out how to make a telephone work. And there's kids today are not taught genuine curiosity. You don't want them to take your car apart and then can't put it back together. But at the same time, I had an uncle that did that, and he had a whole pail of stuff that was left over, and the car ran beautifully. So I wouldn't want to ride in it, but it ran. But curiosity is being absolutely squashed. The desire to see what if is squashed, and the kids today just I cry because they're and we won't even go into the history they're teaching isn't accurate history either. So it's even the education system has to be reworked so that the individuals can flourish as individuals. We're not cookie cutters. Everybody's different, but we're not treating our kids that way.
Well, not only are people different, but also places are different. Mm-hmm. That's why decentralization is so vital to the reemergence of living culture, because places are unique, and where you are is extremely important in terms of what kind of spiritual dimensions there are in the natural world. It's different if you're up in the mountains than if you're on the coast, or if you're in, as I am, in a Midwestern area with huge trees around you and farmland, then that has its own natural characteristics. The same is true when you travel. I made it my business to go to many different sacred sites in Western Europe, in Western France, in Scotland, in Ireland, all of these standing stones and all of these different cairns, stone cairns on the top of hills, these caves, sacred springs, and every single one has its own personality, its own characteristics, its own unique qualities. And people in great antiquity recognized that uniqueness of that place and augmented it with stone, working with stone, working with the earth, recognizing the water. And so that's a form of alchemy that we're talking about in this book, which is alchemy of working with nature and also recognizing the spiritual dimensions of nature. And that happens where you are. So if you're in New York City and you have trees and a small park near you, or there's water, or you're in really anywhere, there's a spiritual dimension to that place that's unique to it.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to recognize. That's part of what this book is about, because that's where culture begins to reemerge in a deeper way, which is, again, culture is the unity of the human realm, the spiritual realm, and the natural realm together.
I think that, again, your book is so important because it does bring that out. I know a number of years ago, my late husband and I did a whole documentary on the stone structures that are all throughout the Northeast, the stone chambers, and nobody's been able to say or determine what their purpose was. They're all corbelled construction, and the Indians didn't do them. They don't know who did them. There are many of them oriented to the sunrise and sunset on the solstice, and here we have something so magical and so spiritual, and people are saving garbage in them. They are being torn apart for patios. Where once in the New York area there were 800, it's now down to about 200. And here is a spiritual aspect of our past that is being destroyed because we don't understand it, instead of trying to understand it.
Well, that actually happened also in France about 2 or 3 years ago. In order to put in a home improvement store, this company swept in and took out an entire in Western France. There are some just astonishing standing stone arrays. They're called arrays because there are thousands of standing stones in these arrays. They look like warriors lined up in the fields. And this company bought this property, and they just wiped one out and put in a home improvement store. And incidentally, I put up a notice about that on the hieros.institute website, and I linked to the story. And the story, because of the story was not covered in Western media, it was only covered actually in RT, which is a Russian news network. They covered it. And so I linked to their story, and immediately traffic slowed. So then I thought, well, I'm going to do an experiment. So I removed that link. Traffic came right back. It's very interesting to see what's happening behind the scenes. So on the one hand, you have the destruction of the place, but then you have a form of essentially censorship of talking about the destruction. But it's not overt censorship. It's just you can see it in the traffic. And then in the fact that it's not discussed. So you're absolutely right. There are many mysteries about the landscape, the sacred landscapes.
Well, look at Ireland. It's Ireland, the Fae, the She, the spirit circles that are there. That local people will not destroy them if somebody comes in and destroys them, and they have all sorts of misfortune, and which I think is cool. But the element of, it's not just that it's special and that there's special energy there. It's that it's not a person, but it is an energy that generates some sort of behavior to the people around it, so that it's real energy. It's not in somebody's mind, and so much so that the local people honor the She and won't destroy any of these particular structures that they have around them, not even for a road to go through or something like that. So, and it's kind of like this country. Why can't Americans have that kind of honor for special places? Because I think we've probably destroyed so many in our flight for industry and materialistic things that we've lost some of the magic that has been in the landscape all along.
That's true. I used to travel to different American Indian sacred places, accompanied by friends of mine, tribal friends of mine. We would go out and visit different sites. So I've been to many sites, and I've seen the destruction that's been wreaked upon them as well. So there'll be a wall of only in a certain direction. It'll only be a particular direction, only near water, only it has these characteristics, and then you'll see these images carved in, the petroglyphs. And often people will come and write, Jimmy loves Susie or class of 1989 or who knows what. But the place itself often still exists. Sometimes it's pristine. So that does exist. But what is going to be necessary on the other side of the kind of changes that we're going to go through is a reconstitution, a regeneration of exactly what you're talking about, which is an understanding that we human beings and nature and the spiritual realm all are interconnected. And so we will need to restore that and regenerate that. And that's how culture emerges. And you see that, for example, in Shinto tradition in Japan. In Japan, Japanese Shinto tradition, you have this complex cultural manifestation out of what? Out of nature and out of the kami, the spirits in nature. And so all three are interwoven, and that's what produces this tradition. And that's how traditions emerge all around the world. And there's no reason at all that can emerge also in the United States or anywhere.
Well, we've got in this country, we've got the balanced stones, and some of these stones that are balanced are as large and heavy as a locomotive, and they're standing on a single point, and you can't knock them over. And people don't understand them, so they ignore them. But there's magic there. There's something special there. I know we went and investigated a lot of them, in that Patrick kept saying, don't touch it if you knock it over, and I said, there's no way I can knock this over. And there were no rods in them, because I had a metal detector. I thought, there's got to be iron in it. There's got to be a reason this can stand like this forever. And they were huge, and there was graffiti all over them, and people ignored them and walked around them like it was, natural that rocks stood like this. And it's sort of like, pay attention to what nature is showing you. It's showing you, it's giving you a message, and you're not respecting it, for one thing. And for another, it's sort of like, you can assimilate what that magic is into yourself and improve your life. But they're not doing that. I mean, the stones bothers me, obviously. But as a culture, we are drifting away from the magic that created so many wonders. That your book is going to help to awaken, I hope, within people the discovery of the magic that's all around them and enlighten their way to a better way of living in life.
Well, that's my aim, and that's a good way to describe the aim of the book. I've also created some courses which are on Hieros.institute. There's one that's tied directly to this book, and that has the same title as the book. And then there's another called Becoming Conscious, which is about different practices. It's actually about understanding literature and philosophy and art in terms of becoming more conscious, developing our consciousness and understanding the humanities as different aspects of developing our awareness and our consciousness of each other and of our capacity. So that's a new way or a different way of understanding the humanities. And then I have also a course called The Short Way, which is an overview of a Christian mystical tradition, which is directly related to alchemy, but it's focused primarily on a specific Christian contemplative practice. So those are all on hieros.institute, and they're ways for people to, I don't get any income from those, actually. Anything that goes to those courses then goes to support the site, which is meant to help develop and provide resources for people. And so those are some things that people can do practically, because there are exercises and different practices that are within those courses.
Well, I think I've interviewed hundreds, maybe even thousands of people who are in the spiritual field, and without fail, they all speak of using a form of meditation of some sort to help make a connection to the spirit within. And I think, and you do the same. And, if so many people from so many different directions and so many different modalities are saying the same thing over and over and over and over again, it would stand to reason that there's got to be some sense to it. And the element of meditation is so simple. It's kind of like it's so simple people won't pay attention to it. Now, if you could get a master's degree in it, then maybe they'd want to do it. And if it costs a lot of money, then again, absolutely they would do it. I have met people that have notebooks full of certificates they got from weekend things that if you look at it, they're a shaman, they're a this, they're a that, and it hasn't changed their life any. All they did was pay money for a certificate. And that old saying about college degrees, with all due respect, it's more of the same and piled higher and deeper. And as far as intellect and wisdom go, but if you aren't learning from it, it's just a pile of paper. And meditation should be made to seem more difficult, then maybe more people would do it.
I think that people who are called to do it, who feel that kind of inner call, will do it, and there's a resonance there, and so that's who it's really meant for. And I think in terms of there's all of the different certifications and different things one can do. What I'm saying is that what will happen as this dissolving around us continues to intensify is that life itself is going to encourage us to do the things that I'm talking about in this book. In other words, it's the opposite of getting a certificate for the sake of a certificate. It's rather, this is how things actually are. And as life, as society around us uh, shifts and dissolves in so many different ways, I think your term end of an age is not inaccurate. There's also the beginning of an age. And where does it begin? It begins within this turmoil. It begins
Yeah,
within what we're experiencing now. So in some sense, life itself is pointing us toward this regeneration. And that's really what I feel called to mention to people.
well, I think too, when I say to everyone, a form of meditation is a good idea. Because everybody is so different, the form of meditation that you find works for you is going to be different from everybody else's. It's not, I mean, yes, there are traditional different forms of Tai Chi and all sorts of kinds of meditation. But if you can find something that allows you to be at peace and to listen to your spirit and to blend yourself with nature and the environment around you, then you found a form of meditation that works for you. And it doesn't have to be traditional. It can be unique unto yourself.
Well, definitely being in the natural world itself is a form of contemplation. And when you think about how people lived, say, 500, 700 years ago, when you had to walk along a trail or ride a horse along a trail um, between towns, and there's forest and wilderness, it's a very different way. And the natural patterns of working with nature, planting, harvesting, you know, being connected to those cycles is itself contemplative practice.
Yes.
And that is something that everybody who gardens and farms has some familiarity with. And that is a form of practice. There also are meditation practices that have been developed and perfected over many, many centuries. And uh, the Tibetan Buddhists in particular,
Oh, yeah.
Vajrayana Buddhism has extremely developed maps and maps of consciousness and maps of what happens when you do this, this happens. And
Yeah.
when you do this, this happens. And so that's actually a place that I have significant amount of experience with. And Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, has been extremely important for me and helpful. So being in nature, um, and having meditation and other practices, very important.
It is. And it's a start. And it can only get better and better the more you involve yourself in it and wrap yourself in it. I just noticed our time. And we have only just scratched the surface here. But I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing your book with us, because it's an amazing book. It's not a hard read. It's a really good read, and it's one that you don't want to put down. It's not a struggle to get through. I've had a few of those 800-page books, but I know more about arrowheads than anybody ever should know. But your book, it's an awakening, and that's what I like about it. people will read it and they'll go, aha, that makes sense.
And it also has some illustrations in it, color illustrations that have never been published before, which show alchemical transformation through the figures of a king and queen, male and female, going through these different processes of transformation. So it also has images in it and different aspects that I think people will really enjoy. And I really appreciate the invitation to come and talk about it a little bit with you and discuss our modern age and where we're at and where we're going.
Oh,
And I really appreciate the opportunity.
I'm going to have to check out some of your other books and see if I can't get you back.
That sounds good. You've got a deal.
Okay, thanks so very much. And thanks everybody for being here. And we will be back shortly and catch up on the shows that I missed. Bye-bye now.